Chapter 1. The Gunsmith's Oath. Acton, Massachusetts, April 1775. The boy's hands trembled as he loaded the powder into his musket. Isaac Davis saw it. He said nothing. "Hold steady, Josiah," he called out instead. "Ram it home. One motion." The line of militiamen along the field edge moved in sync, 11 men with flintlocks, bayonets glinting in the dull light, following their captain's every order. Isaac watched them with a craftsman's eye. They weren't soldiers, not yet, but they were close, closer than most. Wind rustled through the bare trees, and Isaac stepped forward, musket cradled across his chest. Again. They obeyed. Powder, ball, ramrod primed the pan. Isaac timed them, 30 seconds, a few faster. They could shoot twice a minute. That might matter soon. He dismissed them just before dusk. The men broke formation with nods and mutters, heading back to farms, to wives, to children. One or two clapped him on the shoulder. No one spoke of what everyone knew was coming. At the edge of the field, Hannah waited. She wore a plain dress, a gray shawl pulled tight over her shoulders. Her dark hair was pinned neatly beneath her cap, but her eyes searched his face the moment he approached. They always did lately. "You drilled them again," she said quietly. "They need it." She didn't argue. She hadn't for weeks. They walked together down the dirt path to their home, a modest salt box with a small forge out back and the smell of oil and gunpowder in the walls. Inside, their children sat near the hearth, playing with carved blocks. Hannah scooped up their youngest, a girl not yet 2, and kissed her forehead. Isaac looked at them a long time before turning toward his workbench. In the glow of lantern light, he opened the lid of a wooden chest and lifted out a musket. He inspected the lock, ran a cloth down the barrel. Ormore waited in line. He checked each. Not one would misfire. "You'll fight then," Hannah said from the doorway. He didn't answer at first. "Then if they come, yes." She stepped closer. "You mean when they come?" He nodded. "You think it will be you," she said. "You and your men. They're ready." She stared at him. "Will they be ready to die?" He met her eyes then, dark, steady, unflinching. "I won't ask them to do what I wouldn't." She didn't cry, not yet. Hannah Davis was not a woman of tears, but her hand tightened on the child she held, and her voice dropped. "I'd rather a coward husband than a dead one." Isaac stood. "I know." She left him alone in the workshop. Later that night, while the children slept, they sat together in silence by the fire. He sharpened bayonets. She mended socks. The warmth between them wasn't spoken. It had been built over years, across births and harvests and sicknesses endured together. But it was there. She didn't have to ask what would happen if the redcoats marched west. She knew. 3 days passed. Then came the knock. It was before dawn. A horse stood outside. The rider leaned in the doorway, dust-covered and wide-eyed. "British are moving," he gasped, heading toward Concord. "Hundreds of them." Isaac nodded once. "Tell the men. Acton musters in 15 minutes. Hannah stood in the corner, still tying her apron. The children stirred upstairs. He strapped on his cartridge box, checked his musket, took the bayonet and fixed it to the barrel. Hannah stepped forward and helped buckle the strap. Their eyes met. He opened his mouth to speak, but said nothing. She placed her hand on his chest for just a moment. Then he turned and walked into the breaking light. She stood in the doorway, watching him lead his men down the road. The line of dark-coated figures vanished slowly into the mist. He didn't look back, but she watched until the last of them was gone. Chapter 2. I Haven't a Man Who's Afraid to Go. April 19, 1775 dawn. Acton to Concord. Frost clung to the roadside brush as Isaac Davis led his men south. The road was quiet except for the steady rhythm of boots and the metallic rattle of muskets slung over shoulders. The sun had not yet risen, but pink light smudged the eastern sky. They marched in 2 columns, 19 men, most of them farmers, one a schoolteacher, another a cooper. All carried live ammunition. All had bayonets. Isaac said little. His mind ticked like a lock mechanism, every motion deliberate. He thought of Hannah, thought of his boys, thought of the gunpowder he'd packed himself, and the flint he'd checked twice. By the time they reached the outskirts of Concord, other militia companies had joined. Sudbury, Bedford, Lincoln. Hundreds now gathered on a low ridge above the town. British regulars had already arrived in Concord hours earlier. Redcoats had broken into homes, searched barns, dumped barrels of flour and musket balls into wells. Smoke rose from somewhere in the center of town. Isaac approached the knot of officers near a stone wall. Captain Buttrick of Concord stood among them, voice low, uncertain. His face was pale. "They're burning the town," someone said. "No," another replied. "Just some supplies." "Doesn't matter," said a third. "We let them torch Concord without a shot. We lose everything." Isaac Davis stepped forward. "Then we take the bridge." The officers fell quiet. Across the North Bridge, a British force of 90 men, soldiers from the 4th and 10th regiments, guarded the span. They stood in formation, muskets ready. Buttrick hesitated. "We don't want to provoke them." "They're already provoked," Davis said. "They're on our soil. They've raided our homes. What else do you need?" Buttrick looked away. Davis turned to the gathered men, his voice clear. "My company is ready. I haven't a man who's afraid to go." That was the end of it. The Acton men took the front line. Their bayonets gleamed dull silver in the morning haze. Isaac took his place at the head of the column. To his right, young Abner Hosmer. To his left, Private James Hayward. Behind them, farmers with muskets and fire in their eyes. Buttrick raised his sword. "March." The line moved. They descended the hill in silence. Damp grass muffled their steps. The Concord River ran cold beneath a wooden bridge, which creaked under British boots. The redcoats tensed at the sight of the advancing line. One shouted something too far off to hear. The distance closed. 200 yards, 100. Then a shot cracked. No one knew who fired first. Another report followed. Then a full British volley. Smoke bloomed across the bridge. Isaac flinched as something struck his chest. No pain, just pressure. Then his legs buckled. He collapsed in the wet grass. Abner Hosmer dropped next, musket clattering to the stones, a beat of stunned silence. Then Buttrick roared, "Fire, men, for God's sake, fire!" The Acton line stopped, leveled muskets, and unleashed a volley. The British faltered. Another volley followed. Then the redcoats broke, turned, and ran back toward the town. The battle was over in 2 minutes. Isaac Davis did not move. Blood soaked through his coat in a dark bloom. His eyes were still open, fixed on the pale sky. Hosmer lay beside him, jaw slack, one hand still gripping the barrel of his musket. The Acton men gathered slowly around their captain's body. Private Hayward knelt. He never even raised his musket. Another man muttered. He led the line. He was the first. A silence fell over them that no musket could break. The men lifted Isaac's body, wrapped it in a cloak, and carried him back across the bridge that his courage had claimed. A bridge no longer held by redcoats, a bridge now marked by blood and history. They walked the long road home with one fewer in their ranks, and the revolution had truly begun. Chapter 3. Widows' Fire, Acton, Massachusetts, April 20th, 1775. The knock came just past sunrise. Hannah Davis stood at the hearth, spoon in hand, stirring porridge for the children. Outside, the wind moved the budding trees, and birds sang with cruel indifference. The little ones chased each other between chairs, giggling, unaware. She opened the door. It was Simon Reed, one of Isaac's militiamen. His coat was damp with morning dew, his eyes red, his voice caught in his throat. Hannah didn't ask. She knew. He removed his hat. "I'm sorry, Hannah. It was at the bridge. He fell first." The spoon slipped from her hand. Simon said more, about the march, about how Isaac had stood at the front, how he never hesitated. He repeated the line Isaac had spoken, "I haven't a man who's afraid to go." Then he told her how they'd carried his body back, wrapped in a cloak, laid gently in the cart of a farmer headed to Acton. She didn't cry. Not then. She nodded once, thanked Simon, and closed the door. The children asked where Papa was. She told them he was with God now, and they were quiet, confused. The older boy, Ephraim, watched her carefully, already understanding too much. Later that day, the town gathered. Word had spread from Concord to every farmhouse and village lane. Captain Isaac Davis was the first to die in open resistance. The militia buried him with honors. The coffin was plain pine, draped in his coat. They carried him through the center of Acton to the churchyard. Muskets fired in salute. 3 shots. The children flinched. Hannah stood straight, her eyes dry, her hands folded. The minister said he had fallen in the cause of liberty. Others whispered he would be remembered longer than any man alive. But Hannah remembered the husband who came home every evening smelling of gunpowder and sweat, who sang quietly to the baby when he thought no one heard, who sharpened his own bayonet with a kind of grim reverence. She remembered how he hadn't spoken when he left, how he looked back once, and how she'd known in her bones it was farewell. When the mourners departed, she remained. She knelt at the grave after the others had gone and pressed one palm against the fresh soil. No tears, not yet. In the weeks that followed, the war spread like wildfire across the colonies. More battles, more blood, more names spoken in reverence and grief. Isaac's became one of the first etched into the story. Hannah kept his tools, his musket hung above the hearth. The bayonet remained in the corner, polished and ready. She raised their children with quiet strength. When neighbors faltered, she did not. When the men marched again, she gave them food, stitched their uniforms, sent them away without complaint. Years later, when the Republic was born and monuments were raised, they came to her door. They wanted to build a marker. She permitted it. They carved the words into stone. Isaac Davis fell in the cause of liberty at the North Bridge in Concord, April 19, 1775. She stood at the dedication with her children beside her, now grown, and watched as the townspeople honored the man who led without fear. A man who marched with resolve into the unknown. One of the younger boys asked her quietly, "Was Papa brave?" She looked down at him, her eyes distant, voice calm. He did what had to be done, and he never looked back. Then she turned toward home, where the fire still burned.